Hello, everybody. Welcome to week 5. Wow, we are past the halfway point. So, week 5 is called Frameworks for Curriculum Design, Subject, Learner, and Problem Centered Approaches. So, I just kind of wanted to review a little bit where we've been and then where we're going. Module 1, if you remember, we looked at just an introduction to curriculum and curriculum evaluation. What is curriculum? How do you define it? We looked at different types of curriculum: explicit curriculum, implicit, the null curriculum. Then you began in module 2, you looked at the philosophical foundations of curriculum and instruction, because our philosophy impacts the curriculum that we develop. Then number 3, we looked at the historical foundations of curriculum. And that's important because history, where we are in history, even where we are politically, will impact the curriculum we develop. And we've seen that in the United States, as depending on who politically is in power, curriculum could change. And so that's important, looking at that historical context and then looking at what are the goals of the nation, right? That trickles down to the state. Then our last module that you just did, and I have not graded your assignments yet, are the psychological and social foundations of curriculum. So how do learning theories, how does social foundations, the social structure of a community, of an area, how does that impact curriculum? So all of that's important. So why did I do all of that first? Because the major project that you're going to be doing in this class is you're going to be looking at a curriculum, and you're going to be evaluating that curriculum. So that's what we're kind of talking about today. So the first half was really a lot of the background, the philosophy, the history, and so forth. Now we're getting at a little bit more nuts and bolts of curriculum. And so that's where we are now. So let's look at what we're going to do this week. So in chapter 5, let's look at our aims for the chapter, or for the module, I should say. I want you to be able to describe, differentiate different types of curriculum frameworks: subject-centered, learner-centered, problem-centered, apply research-based literacy, to evaluate theoretical frameworks and foundations and curriculum designs, analyze real-world curriculum to identify the design orientation or the framework, compare how different curriculum designs impact learning outcomes, equity, teacher decision-making, and then reflect on a Christian worldview. As Christian educators, as Christian leaders in education, how does our worldview contribute to what we select for curriculum and how we apply curriculum? That's very important. What's your assignments this week? I'm glad you asked. So we have 2 assignments this week. Actually, let's talk about what we're going to read. You have, for our reading today, you're going to be reading chapters 6 and 7 of your textbook, and I'm going to be talking about that a little bit. So you have chapter 6 and 7. I do have some videos if you want to watch those. Purpose of curriculum evaluation. So just a few resources, and then other resources that you don't have to read, but they're there under supplemental resources if you want to look at those. So we're going to be reading chapters 6 and 7. So let's now go at our assignment this week. So for your discussion post this week, create a video. So this week we're going to do a video. So I want you to create a video in which you are going to describe your curriculum program. And what I want you to see is what you're doing in your discussion as post on your video is like what you're going to do on your paper this week. So you're going to describe what is the curriculum program that you want to evaluate for your big project. So there's a lot of different options that you could use, but I want you to do a curriculum that you're currently using. If you're homeschooling, you might do something related. I know a lot of you are doing classical education, maybe specific wit and wisdom, something like that. Some of you may be in public schools where you're using different programs like YouFly or Haggerty for reading. Some of you may be doing look at a larger approach, Common Core Standards or Next Generation Science Standards. If you're teaching in a Christian school, you might be using something like a Becca. So you need to decide what you want to evaluate. So you will explain that in your video. And then you're going to explain the design model that curriculum aligns with. And I'm going to go over that a little bit. Is it more like Tyler's model or Taba's model? Is it more like a universal design model, backward design model? You'll explain that. And then you're going to talk about how you're going to evaluate that. And there are a lot of different evaluation tools that you can use. And in the handout, I've given you those evaluation tools. So that's what you'll explain in your discussion post. And you're going to see that that aligns with what you will do this week, which is to write a 2-page proposal in which, so it's not too bad this week. So I want you to see that for the next 4 modules, I'm going to be breaking down your one large assignment that's due at the end. Okay, so we'll be breaking it down into chunks. So in your proposal, you're going to write up kind of what you said in the video, provide the publisher, if it's applicable, educational setting, the name of what you're going to be evaluating, what is the purpose and intended outcomes. And so I've given you some examples here, but there's tons of examples. Then you need to have a rationale, explain why you chose this curriculum. And then you're going to justify how you're going to evaluate it. And I have given you some different frameworks that you can use. Your final project is right here, and it's a rather large paper, so I don't want you to don't be too upset with it. But I've explained the entire project, all the steps here, and I have all the rubrics for every step. And so we are down here at week 5, where you're going to submit a 2-page proposal identifying the curriculum program to evaluate in a selected evaluation framework, include rationale and key evaluation questions. And so that's what you're going to do. The rubric for that's right here. Did you clearly and thoroughly describe the curriculum? Include the context, purpose, setting, population, because remember we talked about that's a part of it, right? The context is important. Did you select a highly appropriate aligned evaluation framework? Did you provide strong justification for your rationale? And then of course, we'll be looking at APA. So this is a shorter paper this week. This is a proposal, so I can give you feedback on what you're going to do. So I'm going to go back now, and that's your 2 assignments. So let's talk about this a little bit. I'm now going to go over to our reading for this week, and you have 2 chapters. The first chapter you're going to be reading about is curriculum design. And so it talks about a lot of the complexities of curriculum design, so you'll be reading that. So this is really getting to some of the nuts and bolts of curriculum design. So what's the sources of curriculum design? It talks about science as a source, society as a source, moral doctrine as a source, knowledge as a source, the learner as a source. So see, depending on your philosophy, it's going to determine the type of curriculum. Talks a little bit about horizontal and vertical organization. And this is important to understand when you look at curriculum. And so when you look at curriculum, you're looking at what is happening in each grade level, right? But we're also looking at how that curriculum develops from kindergarten to 1st to 2nd to 3rd to 4th to 5th. I actually did an activity with my students yesterday, where we looked at the horizontal and vertical standards for the Common Core standards for communication. had them get in groups of 6, and they looked at one standard and looked at kindergarten, first, second, and they read those standards to see the horizontal and vertical organization. A lot of times as a leader, some of your principals as a principal, many times we do grade level team where they're planning, but I also encourage you sometimes to do horizontal where you are having maybe K and first grade plan. We need to know how the curriculum builds on each other. So that's a big part of curriculum. Talks about tips. So this is kind of the nuts and bolts. So what do you include in a curriculum? Well, you're going to look at the scope, sequence. Those are kind of the basics, continuity, and integration. What are you integrating in? A scope and sequence, I cannot tell you how important a good scope and sequence is to support student learning. I'm currently working with, I'm not even going to say the organization, but I'm working as a consultant for a school district, and they just do not have a strong scope and sequence. And it's been very difficult for me to help the teachers in reading because there's no strong scope in knowing what they're supposed to be teaching each week and then how that will be evaluated. And so a strong scope and sequence is essential. And in articulation, that refers to the vertical and horizontal. Are they related? Are they congruent? And that's important. You have to have balance. So all of these are things that are important in the design of curriculum. I have been a part of designing curriculum, and it's difficult. You can be on, many times you can be a part of a state team, a national team, or maybe your district is doing it. And I would say volunteer to do that. That's it's an important part of your professional development. You guys will have a doctorate in curriculum instruction, so hope you'll be leaders in that. So chapter 6 is all about the design of the curriculum. And then I hope I don't get you sick here. Then we go to chapter 7, and chapter 7 is more about the curriculum. I'm sorry, chapter 7 is the curriculum development. So how you develop curriculum. This is where we get into the types of curriculum frameworks. And so that's what I want to talk to you about today. So a curriculum framework, there's different frameworks for teaching curriculum. In your textbook, it talks about you really can divide it into 2 camps. You have the very technical approach, and then you have the non-technical approach. So your technical approach is going to be your approach that says, there are clear goals, there are clear objectives, there are standards, there are learning activities that align with that. And some frameworks that align with that. We have Bobbitt and Charters are very prolific in curriculum. And of course, Ralph Tyler, very scientific. You start with these aims and goals and they're measurable. So there are other types of the TABA model. That's another scientific model. And backward design, very popular. And then UDL is another type of scientific framework. So if you're not doing a scientific framework, what's the other? That's non-technical approach. That's more of a postmodern, post-constructivist perspective, which basically says, you can't have a specific objective. You can't have a specific measurable outcome because it's all based on the learner. And because the learner changes, the curriculum has to change. So it's very much about that curriculum is evolutionary, curriculum changes, it develops based on the needs of the student. And so you do have some frameworks that are more aligned with that. Now, the big shift in the United States with the science of reading, the name in itself, the science of reading, you can tell what kind of framework is that going to have. It's going to have a very technical framework, right? And so a lot of people with the science of reading have said, this is one of the problems that we had in curriculum. There was too much of this non-technical curriculum that was totally based on the needs of the learner. But what we were missing is a curriculum that was very direct, explicit, and systematic, that had a vertical and horizontal alignment. And that's why our kids aren't reading. So we have to go back to that. So you're going to be reading those 2 chapters, chapter 6 and 7. It's going to give you a lot of information. So I hope you will look at that. I wanted to show you. So there's some things that are, we have the basic principles of curriculum and instruction. I had this when I was working on my doctorate. It was written in 1949, but it is still Ralph Tyler. This is still one of the predominant methods of designing curriculum. So very popular. So that's a framework. So I'm getting ahead of myself. So what I'm going to do is I want to talk to you a minute about some of the frameworks, and then we will move on. So let me show you my screen again. Okay. So what are some of the frameworks for curriculum and instruction? Some of these are in the book. Most of these are in your chapter. Some aren't. Curriculum frameworks. A curriculum framework or a model provides a structured approach. It's how curriculum is created. It's not the same as an evaluation tool. It's the framework. So think about a house. How is a house framed? They answer questions like, what is it that students should learn? How should that learning be organized? And how can I meet the diverse needs of my students? I want you to think about that. What should students learn? One of the reasons I wanted to go into curriculum and instruction is because I wanted to be a part of that conversation as a Christian on what students should learn. See how important that is? This degree is something that hopefully you'll be in a position where you can help make those decisions. Some very popular curriculum models. Of course, the Tyler model. I think most colleges of education, that's what they use, the Tyler model. There's objectives, there's goals, objectives, you have activities to align with those goals and objectives, and that assessment aligns with it. So you start with, what are my goals and objectives? So if just to remind you, a framework is the overall structure, how it's structured, and then the evaluation is how we assess the effectiveness of it. For your big project, you're going to be evaluating a curriculum, but you have to know the framework of the curriculum so that you can pick the right evaluation tool, because some evaluation tools align better with certain frameworks than others. So again, here are some of the basic, and I know you can't see this, I'm going to move on and just give you some examples. We have Tyler's model. Okay, that's a framework where you have your objectives, and I think everyone understands this. Florida best standards are very much kind of a Tyler model. You have those benchmarks, aligned instruction, measurable outcomes, so that Florida assessment is aligned with that. So you have objectives, experiences, organization, and evaluation. Many of you read about TABA's model. This focuses more on teachers as curriculum designers. And usually with the TABA model, we're thinking more of units of instruction. And so with this, though, we're diagnosing the student needs. Based on those needs, we're going to formulate objectives and select content. So I'm going to give you an example. When I was a principal, we'd have professional learning communities. Most of you that are teachers in schools have some type of professional learning community. So let's say you're doing in your PLCs, you look at a unit assessment that you completed in reading. And you might evaluate that and say, okay, our students are struggling in this area. You're diagnosing the student needs. And then based on that, you are going to formulate objectives and content and organize the instruction. A lot of project-based learning activities follow this, along with Writer's Workshop. It follows this kind of framework. So with TABA, with this model, we're kind of starting with what's the need of the students. Based on that, we have objectives, content, organize it, select activities, and evaluate. So you'll notice with Tyler's model, we're starting with what is it? What's the objective? And with TABA's, it's let's diagnose first. Understanding by design. This is a popular framework. Backward design is starting with the end in mind. What is the desired learning outcome? What is it that we want students to be able to do or know? It promotes deep understanding. Usually you will start with identifying the desired result, and that's what we call those enduring understandings. What is evidence that students have to do? It might be project-based learning, projects to show evidence of those enduring understandings, and then planning learning experiences around that. That's kind of your backward design. So with a backward design, we're going to, again, identify the desired results. What is it that we want our students to know, be able to do? What's the evidence that they can show? And then you plan the activity. So you're starting with the end in mind. So you can see the difference between the Tyler model, where you're starting with objectives, to the UBD, where we're starting with what is the end result. Then we have universal design for learning, which are similar but not the same. This is more in special education. It focuses on a flexible curriculum that reduces barriers and supports. This is very popular. This is in this framework, we're looking at expert learners, where we want to make sure that the students are motivated, are resourced, strategic, and so we're differentiating so that all students have mastery of the content. And then the last one, and I had one of you, I think it was Kenya, who said, hey, what about Kilpatrick's model? Yeah, Kilpatrick does have a model. And I think it's in your textbook, but if not, here's Kilpatrick's model. This is very learner-centered experiential curriculum where you do a lot of projects. So with this, the 4 project types are constructive, expressive, problem solving, and so the Kilpatrick model. So those are some of the models that we have. Those are not the evaluation frameworks. And so a couple other things I want to show you. So I kind of was thinking about what have I done? How have I used some of these things? And there are different ways that I've used it. So when I was a principal, this is maybe a little bit hard to see, I showed my staff walkthroughs. And I did 152 walkthroughs with 45 teachers. And then this has all of our learning targets. And so I showed them that students doing digital work was our lowest. And then this one is hard to see, but this one that was low was evidence of student thinking, the higher level thinking. And so I went through all of those and I said, guys, this is evidence. This is what we need to work on. Then in our focused collaboration groups, I showed them how I evaluated their focused evaluation groups when those are the same as PLCs. And I showed them that you're not talking about in your PLCs some of these things. And that maybe was one of the reasons why. Then just as a picture of me, I said, dealing with negativity and criticism, how to thrive from a girl from experience. That's a picture of me. So I talked to him about that. And then we, the last slide this is why I wanted to show you this. We planned a backward design. So we said, okay, these are things that we're not doing well with. So therefore, what is our intended, identified, our desired result? What is going to be good evidence of that? And then we plan the experiences. Because see, sometimes what happens is as teachers with curriculum, we say, man, this is a really fun curriculum. I want to do this curriculum, or I'm sorry, not curriculum, this activity, but maybe the activity doesn't align with the content or the enduring understanding. So, okay, last thing I wanted to do is just, again, show you a few things. So again, this week you're going to do a proposal. So you need to think about what is the curriculum that you want to evaluate. Some of you have worked with classical education. So classical education could be a program that you want to look at. Within the topic of classical education, there's lots of different programs, or curriculums. And so probably within classical education, you could get into some specific curriculum ideas, okay? We talked about backward design. Common Core Math is very much a kind of a backward design framework for curriculum and instruction, because it really goes back to those mathematical practices that students have to know. And so when they did the Common Core Math, one of the first things that they did was they kind of worked on these, what are these mathematical practices, establishing, trying to, I got to remember all this, making sense of problems, persevering, reasoning abstractly, constructing viable arguments. So there are 8 mathematical practices. And so the curriculum is based around those practices, and it's more of a backward design of curriculum. And then we have even things like UFly, which I use a lot. It's a reading program. And it's very much more of a Ralph Tyler kind of approach, where you have these specific standards that you're using. So this week, your proposal. That proposal will be really what you're doing in your video for your discussion is what you're going to be writing about. So just to remind you what you're going to do, and I'm going to back and making sure I remember. Under week 5, you have your discussion post. What is your curriculum? What's the program that you're going to evaluate? What is the design model? And then how will you evaluate it? Now, the evaluation part, that's where you're going to have to go into that paper that I created that has the final project, and it will give you evaluation tools that you can use. And then for your paper, it's the same thing. What is the program? Add some context to it. What's the rationale for selecting the evaluation tool that you did? Justify the evaluation tool. And a lot of your justification is going to be, it aligns with the framework. And then, of course, it needs to be in APA. So if you just remember, this final project is right here. And we are on the first step for week 8. When I talk to you about the types of how you can evaluate, I have a lot of those listed up here. CIPP model is an evaluation tool. And here's a rubric. Now, these rubrics are rubrics that are not, these are rubrics that I created using AI, and I put in all the research and I asked AI to create a rubric. You can, because a lot of these frameworks don't have rubrics. Curriculum committees come up with rubrics for those. So I have these, but I also have some links that you can use, other rubrics that are more published rubrics. You can use either one. So if you decided to use the CIPP model, here's a rubric you can use. Tyler's model, there's a rubric. Universal Design, there's a rubric, but I also have a website that you can go to their website and look at their evaluation tool. So you can use these rubrics, or you can go to the website and use some of those. Or if you have your own evaluation tool that your district is using, you can use that. Just run it by me first, okay? Because a lot of these do not have vetted, published evaluation tools. Okay, I hope that helps. Hope it made sense. If you have any questions, let me know. I will have office hours this Thursday at 6 o'clock. So pop in if you need anything. Thank you.